The fist connected with her jaw before anyone could blink. Blood hit the mess hall floor. The Marine stood over her, laughing. But what he didn't know was that the woman he just struck wasn't just any sailor. She was a ghost. And ghosts don't forget. Hey, real quick, comment your city below. I'm always amazed by how many places these stories reach. And if you're into true stories with real emotion, make sure you're subscribed. The mess hall at Naval Station Norfolk was loud that Tuesday morning. Trays clattering, voices bouncing off metal walls. The smell of scrambled eggs and burnt coffee filling the air. It was just another day. Ordinary. Forgettable. Until it wasn't. Lieutenant Sarah Vance stood in line, her tray balanced in one hand. She was small, 5'4", maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. Her uniform was crisp, but unremarkable. No flashy ribbons. No rank that demanded attention. She looked like every other junior officer trying to grab breakfast before morning briefings. But Sarah wasn't like the others. She carried secrets. The kind that didn't belong on dress uniforms. The kind that lived in shadows, in rooms with no windows, in missions that never made the news. Behind her, 3 Marines were horsing around. Big guys, loud, the kind who filled every space they entered with swagger and testosterone. One of them, a staff sergeant named Garrett, was particularly obnoxious. He shoved his buddy, who stumbled backward, laughing. "Watch it, bro." One of them shouted. Sarah didn't turn around. She'd learned long ago to keep her head down in places like this. Stay invisible. Stay silent. That was the first rule of her world. But Garrett wasn't done. He swaggered forward, chest puffed out, and accidentally bumped into Sarah. Her tray tilted. Coffee sloshed over the edge, splashing onto her uniform. "Oh, sorry, sweetheart," Garrett said, not sounding sorry at all. His buddies snickered. Sarah set her tray down calmly. She grabbed a napkin and dabbed at the stain. She didn't look at him. Didn't speak. That made Garrett angry. "Hey," he said louder. "I said I was sorry. You gonna ignore me?" The mess hall started to quiet. People were watching now. Sailors and Marines turned toward the brewing confrontation. Sarah finally looked up. Her eyes were cold, calm. "It's fine," she said quietly. "Accidents happen." She turned back to her tray. Garrett's face flushed red. He hated being dismissed, especially by someone smaller, someone weaker, someone who wore lieutenant bars like they meant nothing. "You know what?" Garrett stepped closer, his voice dripping with venom. "You Navy types think you're so much better than us. Sitting behind desks, playing sailor. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in the Corps." Sarah didn't respond. She picked up her tray, and that's when Garrett made the biggest mistake of his life. "Die, bitch." The words hung in the air for half a heartbeat. Then his fist swung out fast, brutal, aimed right at her face. It connected. Sarah's head snapped to the side. Blood sprayed from her lip. Her tray clattered to the floor, eggs and toast scattering everywhere. She stumbled backward, hitting the wall. The mess hall went silent. Completely silent. Garrett stood there, breathing hard, his fist still clenched. His buddies looked shocked. Someone gasped. Another person pulled out their phone. Sarah touched her lip. Blood smeared across her fingers. She looked at it. Then she looked at Garrett, and she smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd seen things. Done things? Survived things that would break most people. Garrett suddenly felt cold. "You just made a very big mistake," Sarah said softly, before Garrett could respond. 3 master-at-arms appeared, barreling through the crowd. They grabbed Garrett, slamming him against the wall, shouting orders. His buddies backed away, hands up. Sarah stayed calm. She accepted a napkin from a wide-eyed seaman and pressed it to her bleeding lip. An officer approached the commander looking furious. "Lieutenant Vance, are you all right?" "I'm fine, sir," Sarah said quietly. "We'll handle this immediately. That Marine will face court-martial." Sarah nodded. But there was something in her eyes. Something the commander couldn't quite read. Something dangerous. What Garrett didn't know, what nobody in that mess hall knew, was who Sarah Vance really was. On paper, she was a logistics officer, boring, administrative. The kind of job that made people's eyes glaze over at cocktail parties. But that was the cover. The truth was, buried under layers of classified clearances and need-to-know restrictions, Sarah Vance was part of a unit that didn't officially exist. A joint Navy SEAL intelligence group tasked with operations so sensitive, they didn't even have a name. Just a designation, Task Force Phantom. She wasn't a SEAL. Herself, she'd never gone through Bud S, but she'd gone through something else. Something worse. A selection process designed to find people who could blend in, gather intelligence, survive impossible situations, and strike when no one expected it. Sarah was an infiltrator. A ghost. Someone trained to look harmless while being anything but. And now, a Marine had put hands on her in front of hundreds of witnesses. That night, Sarah sat in her small apartment off base, an ice pack pressed to her swollen jaw. Her phone buzzed. A secure text. Heard what happened. You okay? It was from Commander Price, her actual handler. The person who gave her real orders. Sarah typed back, I'm fine. He didn't know. That's not the point. Want us to handle it? Sarah stared at the message. Task Force Phantom had ways of handling problems. Ways that didn't involve courts or paperwork. But Sarah had a different idea. No, I'll handle it my way. There was a long pause. Then, Roger that. Stay clean. Sarah set the phone down and looked at herself in the mirror. Her lip was split, her jaw bruised purple. She looked weak, vulnerable. Perfect. Over the next week, Garrett strutted around base like nothing happened. Sure, he was facing disciplinary action, but his buddies told him it wouldn't stick. The Navy lieutenant probably wouldn't even press charges. She looked like the type who just wanted to go away. What Garrett didn't notice was that people were watching him, quietly, carefully. A lance corporal in his unit started asking weird questions about his schedule. A civilian contractor at the gym struck up friendly conversations, asking about his workouts, his routines. A woman at the base coffee shop seemed to always be there when he was. Smiling politely. All of them reported back to Sarah. She was building a profile, learning everything about Staff Sergeant Garrett. His habits, his weaknesses, his secrets. And Garrett had secrets. Sarah discovered that Garrett had been skimming money from unit funds. Small amounts. Nothing that would trigger alarms. But over 2 years, he'd stolen nearly $30,000. He was also sleeping with a subordinate, a private, who was terrified of him, but too scared to report it. Sarah compiled everything into a neat digital package. But she didn't send it to NCIS. Not yet. She had a better plan. 2 weeks after the mess hall incident, Garrett received orders to report to an office building he'd never been to before. Building 47, a nondescript structure on the edge of the base. The email said it was about his disciplinary hearing. He showed up annoyed but not worried. He figured it'd be some Navy desk jockey reading him his rights. Maybe a slap on the wrist. The room was empty except for one person. Sarah Vance. She sat behind a desk, her bruised jaw now healed. She looked different though, harder. She wore civilian clothes, tactical pants, a fitted black shirt. On the desk in front of her was a laptop and a thick folder. Garrett froze in the doorway. What the hell is this? Close the door, Staff Sergeant, Sarah said calmly. I don't take orders from you. Sarah's eyes locked onto his. Something in her gaze made his blood run cold. He closed the door. Sit down. Garrett didn't move. Where's the hearing officer? There's no hearing officer. This is between you and me. Garrett laughed nervously. You can't do this. I'll report. Report what? Sarah opened the folder. That I showed you evidence of your theft? Your affair with Private Martinez? Your 2DU is that mysteriously disappeared from your record? Garrett's face went pale. How did you? I'm very good at finding things people want to hide. Sarah leaned back in her chair. You hit me because you thought I was weak, helpless, just another Navy officer you could push around. I didn't mean, yes you did. Sarah's voice was ice. You wanted to hurt me, humiliate me, make yourself feel big. Garrett's hand shook. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I'll apologize. I don't want your apology. Sarah stood. She walked around the desk, moving with a predator's grace. Garrett stepped back. What I want, Sarah continued, is for you to understand something. I'm not weak. I'm not helpless. And I'm not someone you can ever touch again. She stopped inches from him. Despite the height difference, Garrett felt small. You're going to withdraw your defense at the hearing. You're going to accept full responsibility. You're going to be dishonorably discharged. And you're going to repay every cent you stole. If you don't, she tapped the folder. All of this goes to NCIS, and trust me, what they'll do to you will make a dishonorable discharge look like a vacation. Garrett's throat was dry. Who are you? Sarah smiled that cold smile again. Someone you should never have touched. The hearing happened 3 days later. Garrett, looking defeated, accepted full responsibility. He was dishonorably discharged, sentenced to 6 months in the brig, and ordered to repay all stolen funds. But the story didn't end there. The day after the hearing, Sarah was called to Commander Price's office. When she arrived, she found Price standing with 2 men in civilian clothes. Their badges identified them as Naval Intelligence. Lieutenant Vance, one of them said. We need to talk about Task Force Phantom. Sarah's stomach dropped. There's been a security review, the man continued. Your cover was nearly compromised by the mess hall incident. Too many people asking questions. Too much attention. I handled it, Sarah said. You did. Which is why we're offering you a choice. The man pulled out a folder, a real one, with official seals. You can continue with Phantom, but you'll be reassigned overseas. Deep cover. No contact with anyone here for at least 3 years. Sarah's chest tightened. 3 years, alone, in hostile territory. Or, the man continued, you can transition out. Honorable discharge. Full benefits. You've served enough. You've earned it. Commander Price looked at her sadly. It's your call, Sarah. Sarah thought about the mess hall, about Garrett's fist, about the blood on the floor. She thought about the life she'd lived for the past 6 years. The missions, the secrets, the constant lying, the loneliness. And then she thought about something else. About standing in that room with Garrett, watching him crumble. About using her skills not just to survive, but to protect herself, to demand respect. I'll take the discharge, Sarah said quietly. Commander Price nodded, relief in his eyes. Good choice. 6 months later, Sarah Vance sat in a small coffee shop in Seattle, far from any military base. She wore jeans and a sweater. Her hair was longer now, no longer in the tight bun regulations required. She sipped her coffee and opened her laptop. On the screen was a job offer director of security for a tech company. Good pay, normal hours. No secrets. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard you got out. Proud of you. Stay safe, Ghost. It was Price. Sarah smiled a real smile this time and typed back. Already am. She closed the laptop and looked out the window at the Seattle rain. For the first time in years, she felt light. Free. Garrett was in prison. Private Martinez had been reassigned and was getting therapy. And Sarah Vance, the woman who'd been struck in a mess hall and underestimated by everyone, had won. Not by being the strongest, not by being the loudest. But by being smarter, tougher, and unbreakable. She finished her coffee, grabbed her coat, and walked out into the rain. A ghost no longer, just a woman who'd survived. And finally, finally, learned to live. That's the end of today's story, but I hope it stays with you for a while. If something in it spoke to you, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet, and share your thoughts. It's your comments that keep me inspired to make the next one.